Officer, you need to tell me a clear reason why you stopped me.
We'll get to it. Where are you coming from? Who's the car belong to?
It's my car.
You got anything illegal in the vehicle?
No.
Do you mind if I take a quick look in the car?
I don't consent to any search.
Relax. It's just a quick check.
No, sir. I'm saying it clearly. No consent.
The officer stood tight at the driver's side window like this was a felony stop, not a traffic contact. Andre Whitaker kept both hands visible. Calm posture, engine off, seatbelt still on. The officer didn't start with a reason. He started with control, license, registration, where Andre was coming from, who the car belonged to, and why he was driving it. Andre answered the basics without volunteering anything extra. He asked what the stop was for. The officer didn't give a clear reason. He acted like Andre's question was a problem. The officer then shifted the whole tone. He treated the Mercedes like it was a stolen vehicle and treated Andre like he needed to prove he belonged in it. He asked ownership questions again. He studied the interior with his flashlight. He leaned in closer than necessary, scanning Andre's hands, the console, the back seat, like he expected to catch something. Andre stayed steady and asked again what the legal reason for the stop was. The officer still didn't explain it in a clear, direct way. He kept it vague. That vagueness was the first warning sign because when an officer can't articulate a reason early, they usually start building one later. Then the officer moved to the next step, getting Andre out of the car. Andre didn't argue and he complied because he understood exactly how quickly a simple stop could turn dangerous when one person decided it was already a criminal investigation. He stepped out slowly and kept his movements controlled. The officer immediately repositioned him off the door line and started directing his body like Andre was being detained for something serious. The officer said it was for safety. That's a common phrase officers use when they want distance and dominance, without admitting they don't have enough legal justification yet. Andre asked if he was being detained. The officer avoided a straight answer again. He talked around it. He treated basic questions like defiance. Then the officer did a pat-down. Not a quick professional one, a rough one. The officer used unnecessary force in the movements. Hands firm, pressure heavy, body angle aggressive. Andre didn't react emotionally. He didn't pull away. He didn't escalate. He stayed still, kept his voice level, and made it clear he was complying. Andre also asked for a supervisor. That request mattered. A supervisor request is a signal. The citizen is documenting the interaction mentally, and the officer now knows there's an oversight risk. Some officers adjust and calm down when they hear it. This officer didn't. He took it personally. After the pat-down found nothing, the officer should have de-escalated or at least explained the stop clearly. Instead, he went for the car. Andre stated clearly that he did not consent to any search. The officer did not accept that. He moved anyway, positioning himself at the door and scanning inside like the decision was already made. This is where the stop crossed from uncomfortable into legally risky, because consent was denied, and the officer still pushed forward like he could search first and justify later. Andre repeated that he didn't consent. He stayed calm, didn't touch the officer, didn't block him physically. He just stated his boundary and watched the officer's next move closely. The officer opened the door and started searching. He checked the front area first, then shifted to compartments, moving items around like he expected to find contraband. Andre stood nearby, cuff-free at this point, but effectively controlled, kept in a position where he couldn't move freely without being accused of interfering. The officer found nothing in the first sweep. That should have ended it. Instead, the officer's behavior signaled something else. He wasn't searching because he had a solid reason. He was searching because he didn't like being questioned and didn't like being told no. Andre watched the search and tracked the sequence in his head like an evidence log. The lack of a clear reason at the start, the ownership insinuations, the rough pat-down, the denied consent, and the search continuing anyway. And while all of this was happening, something important was building in the background. The dispatch timeline was recording every second of the stop, and the body camera was capturing the gap between what the officer was doing and what he could justify. The officer finished another pass. Still nothing. And that's when he escalated again, because now he had a problem. He had committed to the suspicion, and the car wasn't giving him anything to show for it. He turned back to Andre and moved toward detention. The officer stepped back from the open door and looked at Andre like the empty search was Andre's fault. He didn't reset. He didn't acknowledge the lack of anything found. He went straight into the next control move, detention. He directed Andre's hands behind his back and moved in fast. Andre didn't resist. He didn't flinch. He didn't give the officer the reaction he seemed to be fishing for. Andre stayed controlled and asked, again, what the legal basis was for putting him in cuffs. The officer still didn't give a clean answer. He used general language. He framed it like Andre was being temporarily detained while he figured things out. That's how some officers try to buy time when the original reason for the stop isn't strong enough to hold up later. Andre's wrists were cuffed. The officer tightened them like he wanted the cuffs to feel like a lesson. Andre didn't complain loudly. He didn't raise his voice. He just noted it and kept his eyes on the officer's behavior and the sequence of steps. This wasn't just about being right in the moment. Andre was already thinking about how it would read on a timeline. The officer walked Andre toward the curb area, positioning him where passing traffic could see. It wasn't an accident. Public visibility adds pressure. It makes people feel smaller and more compliant. Then the officer went back to the radio. Dispatch was already tracking the stop with timestamps. The stop initiation, the request for information, the pauses, the tone shifts. Every second was logged, and every transmission created a record the officer couldn't rewrite later. The officer ran Andre's license information again, not like a routine check, but like he expected a hit. He asked dispatch to confirm the vehicle. He pushed for extra checks. He treated the entire thing like he was trying to justify the handcuffs after the fact. Andre stood there cuffed, calm, not begging, not arguing, not trying to talk his way out. He let the officer keep talking to dispatch because every word was making the record cleaner. The officer's energy changed when dispatch came back with the first confirmation. The vehicle wasn't stolen. The registration wasn't a problem. Nothing was matching the story he had tried to build. Instead of ending it, the officer tried one more angle. He pivoted to vague suspicion. He implied Andre's behavior was off. He said Andre seemed too calm, like calmness itself was evidence. That's a real tactic. When nothing else works, they make your emotional control sound suspicious. Andre kept his posture steady and requested a supervisor again. He didn't threaten. He didn't flex. He didn't identify himself yet. He didn't say what he did for a living. He didn't use rank as a shield. He stayed focused on procedure. Then dispatch asked the officer to confirm a detail, Andre's employment field or associated agency information that popped up in the system. The officer gave the detail without thinking much of it, still talking like he had leverage. And then the tone over the radio shifted. Dispatch came back with a confirmation that landed like a weight. Andre Whitaker was not just law enforcement. He was an active chief of police at the department level. You could hear the change even without hearing emotion. Dispatch got more precise, more careful. Like they realized this was no longer a normal call. The officer froze for half a second. That half second mattered. That's the moment his mind recalculated risk. His posture changed. The chest-out dominance dropped. The aggressive certainty softened. He looked back at Andre like he was seeing a different person, even though Andre was the same person he had been 10 minutes earlier. Andre didn't move. He didn't smile. He didn't turn it into a victory lap. He stayed serious because he knew what this really meant. The stop was now going to be reviewed, and the record was already ugly. The officer tried to backpedal without admitting it. He loosened the verbal pressure and started talking like this was all standard. He acted like the handcuffs were routine, like the search had been normal, like the escalation hadn't happened. But the camera didn't care about his new tone. And that's when the supervisor finally arrived. The patrol unit pulled in and stopped with purpose. Sergeant Elena Park stepped out and didn't waste time. She didn't mirror the officer's defensiveness. She went straight to facts: who, what, why, and where the legal basis was. The officer gave a fast explanation that sounded rehearsed. Bits of it didn't line up with what had already happened. Andre didn't interrupt. He didn't debate. He let the supervisor work. Sergeant Park approached Andre, verified him properly, and the whole situation deflated in seconds. The cuffs came off quickly after that, with none of the attitude the officer had used putting them on. Sergeant Park ended the detention like a professional trying to stop a fire from spreading. She shifted the stop back into a controlled wrap-up, then moved the officer away for a private conversation. Andre didn't argue at the roadside. He didn't lecture. He didn't demand immediate punishment. He did something colder and more effective. He treated it like an evidence case. He asked for identifying information, unit numbers, and confirmation that the recordings would be preserved. He made sure the supervisor knew he would be filing through official channels, with the timeline, not emotion. And when he got back into his car, the humiliation didn't disappear, but it became something else: documentation, process, accountability. Andre didn't wait until he got home to remember what happened. He treated the stop like it was already going to be reviewed by someone who didn't care about feelings, only facts, timestamps, and policy. As soon as he was clear of the scene, he documented the sequence while it was fresh. The time the lights came on, the first questions, the refusal to state a clear reason, the ownership insinuations, the order out of the vehicle, the rough pat-down, the denied consent, the search anyway, the handcuffs, and the delay while the officer tried to find something to justify the escalation. He wrote it like an incident log. Short entries, exact order, no dramatics. Then he preserved what mattered. He requested retention of all related recordings through official channels. His own stop was on the officer's Bodycam, but it was also tied to dispatch audio, CAD timestamps, and any dash footage. He knew how quickly routine footage could auto-purge if no one flagged it. So he flagged it. He also requested the stop identifiers: officer name and badge number, unit number, supervisor name, and incident number. Sergeant Park had already given him enough to anchor the request properly. Andre didn't chase it with phone calls. He did it clean. So nobody could say later that they didn't know what he was asking for. Within days, Andre filed a formal complaint with Internal Affairs, not a rant, not a threat, a structured complaint. He framed it as a policy and constitutional issue: an investigative detention with no clear articulation, a search after consent was clearly denied, a prolonged stop to build suspicion after the fact, and handcuffing without a solid basis. He noted the roughness of the pat-down without exaggerating it. He focused on what could be proven, and he attached what made it impossible to brush off: the timeline points that would match the body cam and dispatch record. Internal Affairs opened the case fast. Part of that was because Andre was who he was, but the bigger reason was that the stop was risky on its face. A traffic officer refusing to clearly state a reason, searching without consent, then handcuffing after finding nothing. Those are the kinds of cases that don't just create complaints. They create lawsuits. IA pulled the body cam first. Then they pulled the CAD log. Then dispatch audio. They didn't just watch it once. They ran it like a reconstruction, minute by minute. They checked when the officer first called in the stop, when he requested returns, when he said certain phrases, and how the reasons evolved as the stop failed to produce anything. And the problem showed up immediately. The officer's report claimed a clear initial reason for the stop. The video showed him avoiding it and circling around it. The report claimed suspicion developed based on Andre's behavior. The video showed Andre controlled, compliant, and asking basic procedural questions. The report implied consent or legal justification for the search. The audio captured Andre denying consent clearly, and the officer continuing anyway. The report justified the handcuffs as necessary for officer safety and investigative detention. The video showed the officer escalating after the search came up empty, not because of a new threat. And then there was the part the officer couldn't explain. The shift after dispatch confirmed Andre's identity. IA noted it. Not because status matters in policy, but because the behavior change showed something important. The officer treated the stop one way when he thought Andre was just another black driver in a nice car, and another way when he realized there would be consequences. That's the kind of detail investigators pay attention to, because it shows motive, decision-making, and credibility. Sergeant Park's involvement helped in one way and hurt in another. It helped because she ended it quickly and acted professionally once she arrived. It hurt because it highlighted how unnecessary the escalation was before she got there. If a supervisor can arrive and stabilize it in minutes, it raises the question of why it ever got to cuffs in the first place. IA interviewed the officer. He tried to justify the stop using standard phrases. Furtive movements, nervousness, inconsistent answers, officer safety. He leaned on broad language that sounds good in reports, but those phrases are only useful if the video supports them. This video didn't. So IA did what they always do when a report and video don't match. They tested credibility. They compared his narration to the footage. They compared the timing of his claimed suspicions to when he actually took actions. They compared his alleged indicators to what was visible and audible. And it didn't hold. The findings weren't framed as one bad moment. They were framed as multiple violations stacked together. Failure to properly articulate the basis for the stop and detention. Improper search decision after consent was denied. Improper escalation and prolonged detention. And report inconsistencies that did not match recorded evidence. Once that was documented, the department had limited options. The officer was placed on administrative leave while the review moved forward. Then the case left the building in a different way. City risk management and legal counsel got involved because IA findings plus clear video equals exposure. Civil rights claims don't need drama. They need evidence. The stop had evidence. Andre didn't grandstand. He didn't go on social media. He didn't leak clips. He let the process do what it was built to do, when it's forced to. By the time the department reached the disciplinary phase, the issue was no longer whether the stop looked bad. It was whether the city could defend it. And the answer was trending toward no. Internal affairs didn't drag it out. Once the interviews were done and the recordings were reviewed, the department had a decision to make. Treat it like a coaching issue, or treat it like a credibility and rights issue. With the report not matching the video, it couldn't stay in the coaching lane. Officer Trent Maddox stayed on administrative leave while command reviewed the findings and discipline recommendations. The department also looped in city leadership early because the risk wasn't just internal, the risk was legal, and that part moved fast too. Andre filed through the proper civil channels, not as a personal grudge, but as a clean civil rights claim based on the exact sequence. Stop escalation without solid articulation, search after clear non-consent, extended detention without support, and handcuffing after nothing was found. The city's attorneys did what they always do when there's Bodycam and dispatch audio. They tested the defensibility. They reviewed the stop the same way IA did, minute by minute. They looked for a clear initial reason. They looked for a lawful basis to extend the stop. They looked for probable cause or valid exception for a search after consent was denied. They looked for a legitimate reason for handcuffs. They didn't find a strong one. The officer's written report didn't save him. It made it worse, because the inconsistencies created a second problem: credibility. If the video is one story and the report is another, the city can't confidently put that officer on a witness stand. and they can't confidently defend the conduct. That's when the employment side landed. The department terminated Officer Maddox. The official basis wasn't framed as, he stopped the chief. It was framed as the documented violations and the mismatch between his report and the recorded evidence. The identity of the driver shouldn't matter. The standards do. In this case, the standards were the whole issue. That termination didn't end the exposure for the city, though, because from a civil perspective, the story stayed the same. A black driver in a silver Mercedes was treated like a suspect from the first second, searched without consent, then cuffed after nothing was found, until dispatch confirmed who he was. The city knew how that looked to a jury, and they knew what the recordings would sound like in a courtroom. So the case moved into settlement talks. The settlement wasn't just a check, it was a package. The city agreed to a payout, and they also agreed to changes that were directly tied to how this stop went wrong. Tighter requirements for stop articulation early in the contact. Clearer standards for when a search is lawful after consent is denied. Supervisor involvement earlier when a stop escalates beyond routine. An increased auditing of bodycam footage to catch patterns before they become lawsuits. Those changes mattered more than press statements. They were process changes that could be measured. Training modules updated, policy language tightened, and supervisors required to document their involvement when a stop crosses certain thresholds. Andre didn't treat the outcome like a win over one officer. He treated it like proof of what he already knew. He knew that if the stop hadn't been recorded, the written report would have been the only story. He knew that if dispatch hadn't confirmed his role, the cuffs might have stayed on longer and the stop might have escalated further. And he knew that the only reason this ended with accountability was because the evidence trail was preserved before anyone could rewrite it. That's the part people miss. Accountability usually isn't loud. It's paperwork, recordings, timestamps, and supervisors being forced to answer hard questions. In the months that followed, the incident became a reference point inside the department. Not a rumor, a training example, a case file with a timeline that couldn't be argued with, and in private, Andre carried the part that doesn't show up in policy updates. The reality that none of his credentials protected him from being profiled in the first place. The only thing that protected him was staying controlled and letting the system record itself. So here's the question for you. If you were Andre, would you have stayed that calm? Or would you have argued in the moment and risked giving the officer what he wanted? Drop where you're watching from in the comments and tell me what you would have done. And if you want more real, grounded stories about accountability, rights, and consequences, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
Evening. How's it going? Maybe it's time for you to leave?
Sir, is there a reason you're checking on us?
Where are you coming from tonight?
Before we do all that, what's being investigated?
Just checking. We've had issues out here.
What's the legal basis for this contact?
You need to leave.
What happens when a patrol officer walks up to a black family eating pastries in an upscale plaza, starts asking aimless questions with no call number, no complaint, no alleged crime, then gets angry the second the father asks the only 3 questions that matter? What's being investigated? What's the legal basis? And are we detained or free to leave? The answer gets ugly fast because the camera didn't just catch an uncomfortable stop. They caught an officer trying to invent one in real time. Quick thing. Tell me where you're watching from. Country, state, whatever. And if you like stories where it's a calm recording and rules, beat ego and intimidation, hit like and subscribe. These cases don't fix themselves. Now, rewind. It was early evening at a high-end outdoor plaza. Clean storefronts, patio heaters. A cafe that charged too much for coffee and still stayed packed. The kind of place where people assume nothing bad happens because the pavement looks expensive. Darius Colson sat with his wife, Renee, and their teenager, Malik. Normal family setup. Drinks on the table. A bag of takeout pastries. Malik half on his phone, half pretending he wasn't. Renee scanning the crowd the way moms do. Darius relaxed but not careless. He had the posture of someone who'd spent years watching how quickly a small contact turns into a problem. Darius wasn't just any dad. He ran internal affairs for a different agency across the county line. That mattered later. Not because he planned to flex it, because he understood the mechanics. How officers write their narratives, how supervisors decide whether to cover or correct, how important the first minute is. The patrol officer approached like he'd already decided the table needed attention. Officer Tyler Kincaid didn't start with a clear reason. No mention of a call, no request from the cafe, no report of theft, disturbance, or trespass. He started with the classic soft fishing trip. Where are you headed? Where do you live? How long have you been here? Questions that sound friendly until you notice they don't lead anywhere. Darius answered basic stuff the way most people do when they're trying to keep the temperature down. Then Kincaid kept going. Same tone, same vagueness, more questions. Nothing specific. You could feel the shift before it happened. The moment Darius stopped playing along and moved it into boundaries, Darius asked for the purpose of the contact. He asked if there was an investigation. He asked what legal basis the officer was operating on. Then he asked the cleanest question in policing, the one that forces honesty: detained or free to leave? Kincaid didn't give a clean answer. That's where this turned. Because if Kincaid said free to leave, the contact ended. No IDs, no leverage, no control. If he said detained, he'd have to name reasonable suspicion. A real reason, not vibes. So he did what officers do when they want the advantage, without the accountability. He tried to hold the family in place while pretending it was casual. He started talking about needing cooperation. He framed it like a courtesy. He implied that refusing would make things worse. Then he moved to IDs. Not in a lawful, articulated way. More like he was trying to make it sound routine, like everyone does it, like it's no big deal. Like handing over identification was just part of being outside. Darius didn't argue. He didn't rant. He didn't raise his voice. He kept it tight. He repeated the same 3 questions, calm and boring on purpose. Purpose. Basis. Detained or free. Kincaid didn't like that. You could tell because his body language tightened. He stopped standing like a guy chatting. He started standing like a guy taking control. Feet planted, hands closer to his belt. He angled himself to block the easy path away from the table. Renee clocked it instantly. She shifted her chair slightly. Not dramatic. Just enough that she and Malik weren't boxed in. Malik lifted his phone. Not in anyone's face. Not yelling about rights. Just recording. Kincaid noticed. And that was the trigger. His tone hardened. He tried to manage the camera without directly ordering it off, because he didn't want to say the quiet part out loud. He started talking faster. He started repeating himself. He tried to push the moment into a scene where he could claim safety concerns if anyone challenged him later. Darius stayed steady. He didn't threaten. He didn't mention his job. He didn't try to embarrass the officer. He just kept insisting on clarity, because clarity is what ends fishing expeditions, and now people nearby started paying attention. A couple at the next table stopped talking. A server slowed down mid-step, pretending to wipe a clean table just to stay close. A guy in business casual turned his body toward the interaction like he'd seen this before and didn't like where it was going. The plaza had security cameras. Everyone knew it. That's why Kincaid should have been careful. Instead, he got bolder. He kept pushing for IDs. He kept refusing to name a reason. He kept acting like Darius was the problem for asking for basic legal clarity. That's the part that always hits people later. The way the system flips it. The targeted person becomes uncooperative the moment they ask for facts. By the time Kincaid stepped back and spoke into his radio, it was obvious he wasn't calling in a crime report. He was calling in reinforcements to increase pressure. And the family knew it. Darius didn't panic. He didn't rush. He did what he'd trained himself to do and what he'd trained investigators to do. He made the moment recordable. Names, badge, time, location. The officer's exact words captured clean. Because Darius already understood something Kincaid didn't. The real confrontation wasn't happening at the cafe table. It was going to happen later in the paperwork, in the footage, in the logs. Backup arrived the way it usually does when nothing real is happening, but an officer wants leverage. No rush, no urgency. Just another unit sliding into the plaza like muscle. Officer Tyler Kincaid visibly relaxed when he saw it. Not because the situation got safer, because now he had an audience in uniform. He could act like this was normal procedure and hope the second officer would fall in line. Darius Colson stayed seated. He kept his hands where they could be seen. He didn't give Kincaid a reason to narrate threat into the moment. He kept his voice level and kept asking for the same three things. What was being investigated, what legal basis supported the contact, and whether the family was detained or free to go. Kincaid wouldn't answer any of them cleanly. He kept speaking in generalities, the kind of language that sounds official but carries no facts. He suggested there had been issues in the area. He implied someone had called. He referenced suspicious activity. He never tied any of it to a specific crime, a specific report, or a specific description. Then he pushed the contact where he wanted it from the start. Identification. He didn't frame it like an optional request. He framed it like the family owed it to him. He told them it would make things easier. He acted like refusing was automatically suspicious. He tried to pull Renee and Malik into it too, like getting everybody's ID would turn a family table into a tidy little file. Darius didn't bite. He didn't make speeches. He didn't insult the officer. He kept it simple and procedural, because he understood the trap. The moment you start debating, the officer gets to say you were argumentative. The moment you hand over ID without cause, the officer gets to turn the stop into whatever he wants. Malik raised his phone and began recording, steady but clearly nervous. Renee followed a second later, not dramatic, just careful. She angled her phone so it captured the officer's face, his hands, and the table. She wasn't trying to win a moment. She was trying to preserve one. Kincaid saw the phones and his whole approach shifted. He didn't outright order them to stop recording. He knew that would look bad on camera. Instead, he tried to make the recording sound like interference. He warned them about getting involved and creating problems, even though Malik was sitting still and wasn't close to the officer at all. He wanted those words captured. He wanted a future report to include the idea that the phone itself was a threat. It didn't work the way he expected because other people noticed the same thing the family noticed. There still wasn't a reason. A couple at the next table stopped eating and started filming. A man near the storefront turned his body to get a clean view and held up his phone. A woman passing by slowed down, saw the posture and the tone, and decided to record too. The plaza wasn't loud, but attention gathered fast. You could feel the mood change. People didn't like what they were seeing. Kincaid tried to regain control by changing the physical space. He stepped closer to the table, just enough to crowd it. He positioned himself where leaving would require the family to pass him. He gave small instructions that weren't tied to any real safety concern. Move this, place that, keep hands visible. Things that sound reasonable, until you realize he still hadn't explained why he was there. He was building a scene with rules, because rules make people feel trapped. Darius didn't move the way Kincaid wanted him to. He didn't stand up. He didn't reach for his wallet. He didn't give the officer any sudden motion he could use to justify grabbing or escalating. He stayed calm and kept forcing the same decision point. Either this was a consensual contact and the family could leave, or it was a detention and the officer needed legal grounds. Kincaid avoided the fork in the road again, and that's when he started leaning into the unspoken logic. He began talking about the plaza itself, about how they'd been watching the area, about the kind of crowd that was usually there. He kept glancing around at other diners as if the family's presence disrupted the environment. He wasn't saying, "You don't belong." He didn't have to. The message came through anyway, and the bystanders reacted to that part. You could see it. The looks exchanged, the quiet disbelief. Someone muttered a comment that carried just enough volume to be heard. Not a chant, not a confrontation, more like a reality check in real time. Darius asked for a supervisor. That changed the stakes. Now Kincaid had to either end the contact or justify it to someone with rank. He chose to stall. He radioed, then stayed planted, still pressing for IDs, as if he could win by wearing them down before the supervisor arrived. While they waited, Renee did something very smart. She spoke calmly and stated factual details for her recording. Location, time, that they were seated and eating, that the officer still hadn't stated a crime, that he was demanding IDs anyway. It wasn't dramatic. It was documentation. Malik kept recording, and his hands steadied as the minutes went on. That's what kids do when they realize something serious is happening and no adult is stepping in yet. They lock onto the task. Hold the frame. Capture what matters. Then Sergeant Lena Ortiz arrived. Ortiz didn't show up with a friendly smile. She walked in like she wanted the shortest path to the truth. She asked Kincaid what the call was. She asked what crime was being investigated. She asked what reasonable suspicion he had. She asked what exactly he needed from this family and why. Kincaid tried to talk his way out of the hole he'd dug. He referenced suspicious behavior, but couldn't name any behavior. He referenced complaints, but couldn't say who complained or what they reported. He tried to imply a matching description, but couldn't give a description that matched anything specific. His story kept changing because it was being built on the spot. Ortiz pressed him again, more directly, because she understood how this looked on camera, and she understood what happens later when facts don't line up. And under that pressure, Kincaid slipped back into the coded explanation about the plaza and who normally sat there. He framed it like the family stood out, like being out of place was a legitimate basis. That was the moment the bystanders fully clocked it. Phones didn't drop. People didn't drift away. The crowd energy got sharper because everyone knew what they'd just heard. Ortiz made a decision that cut through the whole mess. She ended the stop. She told Kincaid he didn't have grounds to demand identification. She made it clear the family wasn't detained. She directed him to clear the contact and step back. Darius didn't celebrate. He didn't scold. He did the practical thing. He made the ending as clean as possible on video. He asked for Kincaid's name and badge number. He asked for Ortiz's name and badge number. He confirmed clearly that they were free to leave. He ensured that the recording captured the supervisor's decision, not just the officer's behavior. Renee gathered their things without rushing. Malik kept filming until they were physically moving away, and the officers weren't within arm's reach. Because people learn this the hard way. The last 10 seconds can be where someone tries to reassert control. They walked out of the plaza, calm and together. Malik didn't look the same as he had at the beginning. He wasn't crying. He wasn't yelling. He was quiet in that way teenagers get when something cracks their assumptions. And Darius already had his next steps lined up. Not in anger, in procedure. He was about to treat that whole encounter the way internal affairs treats any incident that smells like manufactured justification. Preserve, timeline, footage, logs, and no room for rewriting history. Darius Colson didn't argue online. He built a case. That same night, he secured the original recordings from Renee's and Malik's phones. No edits, no screen recordings. He copied them to 2 places and kept the originals untouched, so nobody could claim the files were altered. Then he wrote a timeline while it was fresh. Exact order of events. When Kincaid approached, when he first demanded IDs, when Malik started recording, when backup arrived, when Sergeant Ortiz arrived, and the exact moment Ortiz ended the stop. Next morning, Darius mapped the cameras. He walked the plaza and noted every likely source: the cafe exterior cameras, plaza security cameras, and storefront cameras pointed toward the patio. He documented where they were and what they covered. Then he moved fast on preservation before overwrite. He contacted the cafe manager and plaza security, requested footage retention for the time window, and wrote down who he spoke to and when. Renee handled bystander video. She posted a short request in a local group asking for raw files from anyone who recorded. People responded. Darius collected the originals and noted who filmed what, angle, and when. After that, he filed a structured complaint, not emotional, tight and specific. He listed the time, place, involved names, badge numbers, and the key fact. Kincaid demanded IDs while refusing to name any crime or lawful basis, and the contact ended only when a supervisor forced clarity. He requested the records that stop backfilled stories, dispatch logs and CAD notes for the time window, radio traffic, Bodycam for Kincaid, the backup officer, and Ortiz, any bolos or descriptions tied to the area. He also made one point clear. He worked internal affairs, so this review needed clean handling, documented steps, and proper separation. By the time the department opened the file, the evidence was already stacked: multiple raw angles, fixed cameras, and a timeline that wouldn't bend. And Malik, he watched all of it, quiet, processing, realizing that doing everything right still doesn't prevent a stop, but it does decide what happens after. The department couldn't slow walk it. Too many cameras, too many angles, too clean. Darius's complaint forced the first question every reviewer has to answer. Was there a real reason for the contact before Kincaid walked up? So they pulled the dispatch logs, CAD entries, and radio traffic for that time window. Nothing matched what Kincaid tried to imply later. No call that described the family. No active case at that cafe. No complaint tied to their table. The timeline showed something worse for him. He approached first, started probing first, demanded IDs first, and only then tried to make it sound like an investigation. Bodycam made it tighter. The video showed Kincaid never naming a crime while pressing for identification. It also captured the turning point: Sergeant Ortiz demanding specifics, and Kincaid slipping into "they don't fit the area" logic instead of a lawful basis. Fixed cameras backed the family's timeline. They showed the family sitting, eating, calm. They showed Malik recording from his chair. They showed the officer crowding the table and blocking the easy exit path. No threats, no chaos, just pressure. Internal review moved fast. Kincaid got hit with serious discipline because the facts didn't leave room for interpretation. An unsupported contact, an ID demand without basis, and behavior that escalated once recording started. Ortiz wasn't punished. Her decision to end it got treated as the correct intervention. The city didn't want a lawsuit where a jury watched those videos frame by frame. They chose settlement, quiet money over loud testimony. After that, procedures tightened. Supervisors had to step in sooner when an officer couldn't name a crime. Officers got reminded in writing that consensual means people can decline and walk away, and that ID demands need a legal reason, not a vibe. Bodycam expectations got reinforced too, especially around articulation. The win wasn't just discipline and a settlement. It was the paper trail and the policy change. Still, the personal cost landed on Malik. He stopped treating nice areas like safe areas. He started watching cops the way adults do. He asked Renee if recording always makes them mad. He asked Darius if being polite even matters. His parents didn't lie to him. They told him the truth. Politeness helps, but proof is what protects you later. That's the lesson. Stay calm. Ask the right questions. Record early. Preserve originals. Build a timeline. Pull the logs. Lock down facts so nobody can rewrite what happened. If you've ever had a moment like this, drop where it happened and what you did in the comments, And if you want more real accountability stories told straight, like the ones people actually live through, like and subscribe.
Hey, you got a second? Can I see your documents?
Yeah, what's this about?
We got a call you've been suspiciously hanging around.
Okay, what is suspicious about just standing near a hotel?
What are you writing down?
I'm federal, on duty. If you need to confirm that, call your supervisor or have dispatch verify.
Don't give me federal. Ask
Picture this. A Secret Service agent on official duty ended up sitting in the back of a local police cruiser. Not for a ride-along. Not for a courtesy move. For a suspicious person call that turned into a power test in public. Drop in the comments where you're watching from, state or country. And if you're into stories where body cams and paperwork do what arguments can't, hit like and subscribe, because this one is all about how accountability actually happens. Now, rewind. The agent's name was Dorian Reed. Plainclothes, advance work. The kind of job where you blend in on purpose because you're not there to be seen. He was working the perimeter of a downtown hotel that was hosting a high-profile appearance the next day. His assignment wasn't glamorous. It was entrances, exits, lines of sight, choke points, and the boring details that stop bad days from happening. He carried a small notepad because phones draw attention and screenshots get misread. He paced. He paused. He watched doors. He checked angles from the sidewalk to the lobby. Normal advance work. Hotel staff didn't see advance work. They saw man taking notes. One staff member, front desk and security overlap, the kind of employee who's told to report anything odd, called local police. They didn't say Secret Service. They said suspicious man. They mentioned the note-taking. They mentioned he'd been walking around the same entrances more than once. That's all it took. Officer Evan Klein rolled up like it was a routine stop. Patrol mindset. Clear the call fast. Figure out if it's nothing or something. He approached Reed near a side entrance that fed into a service corridor. Not a dramatic spot, just public enough to make it messy. People walking by, cameras on the building, a couple smokers near the wall, a rideshare pulling up every 30 seconds. Reed didn't run, didn't argue, didn't posture. He did the professional thing. Hands visible, calm stance, controlled voice. He identified himself as federal law enforcement and said he was on duty. Klein didn't like that answer. Not because it was unbelievable, because it didn't come with details. Reed wouldn't say who was coming, when, or what exactly he was checking. Not out loud, not on a sidewalk, not with random civilians 10 feet away. Reed offered the clean solution. Verification. He said Klein could confirm his credentials through dispatch, or call a supervisor, or request a federal contact number. Anything that didn't involve him explaining a protective mission in public. Klein pushed anyway. He wanted Reed to answer questions right there. He wanted Reed to hand over everything, ID, notes, phone, like this was a normal stop where the officer runs the whole show. Reed stayed polite and firm. He kept repeating the same point. He'd verify identity through proper channels, but he wasn't going to brief a local officer on an active protective detail in the open. That's when Klein started changing the framing. The contact stopped being a quick check. Klein treated it like Reed was being difficult, like refusing to explain meant refusing to cooperate. The tone tightened. Klein's questions turned into commands. The body cam caught it all, including the moment Reed offered verification again. Klein went to officer safety. That phrase that can mean anything if someone lets it. He told Reed he was going to detain him until he figured out who he really was. He pushed for handcuffs. Reed didn't fight. He didn't threaten. He didn't reach. He didn't do anything that made cuffs necessary. He just didn't give the public explanation Klein wanted. And Klein took that personally. He stalled the obvious fix, confirming credentials, and leaned into control instead. He called for backup. He positioned Reed where he could keep him pinned to the interaction. He talked like the cuffs were inevitable, like this was just procedure. Reed kept his composure, still offered the same options. Dispatch verification, supervisor, credential check, fast, quiet, clean. Klein kept pushing for the shortcut. Physical control first, verification later. That right there was the pivot, the mistake forming in real time. Because once you've got a clear path to confirm identity and you ignore it, you're not solving a safety problem anymore. You're creating a legal one. And the camera kept rolling. Klein kept circling the same pressure point. He wanted Reed to explain himself out loud. Reed wouldn't. Not on a sidewalk. Not next to a hotel entrance. Not with civilians within earshot. Klein moved closer. He told Reed he was being detained. He said it like it was already decided. Then he pushed the handcuffs again, framing it as temporary and for safety. Reed didn't give him a reaction to feed off. He stayed steady. He repeated that he'd verify credentials through dispatch or a supervisor. He even offered to stand still, keep his hands visible, and wait while the officer confirmed it. Simple. Safe. No drama. Klein didn't take the off-ramp. He treated Reed's refusal to discuss the mission as refusal to cooperate. That's where officers get themselves into trouble. You can't punish someone for not giving you information they don't legally have to give, especially when they're offering a direct way to confirm identity. Klein called for backup like he was dealing with a threat. On Bodycam, it read like escalation without cause. Reed wasn't aggressive. He wasn't evasive. He wasn't trying to leave. He was literally offering verification. Klein then did the thing that always looks bad later. He delayed the verification process while pushing restraints. He could have keyed dispatch immediately and requested a credential check. He could have asked for a sergeant right away. He didn't. Instead, he kept talking, kept asserting control, kept trying to win the interaction on the sidewalk. Reed stayed careful. He didn't reach for his credentials in a fast way. He didn't make sudden movements. He kept telling Klein he had federal credentials on him and that he'd present them the right way with the right process, so nobody could claim he made a threatening move. Reed knew the game. He'd seen enough videos. A couple people slowed down to watch. Nothing huge, but enough to make it worse. Once a scene forms, officers get stubborn. They don't want to look like they lost. That's the ego trap. Klein fell right into it. Backup arrived first. Another local officer, same posture, same assumptions. Klein gave a quick summary that framed Reed as suspicious and uncooperative. Not violent, not dangerous. Just won't answer and won't explain why he's here. Reed again identified as federal law enforcement and again offered verification. He didn't change his tone. He didn't raise his voice. He kept it professional. That's what made the next part so ugly. Klein committed to the detention. He moved Reed toward the cruiser and treated the cuffs like the default. Reed didn't resist physically. He made it clear he didn't consent to being detained without verification. He said verification was available right now. Klein ignored it. From the outside, it looked like a local officer cuffing a calm man who claimed to be federal, while refusing to take the obvious steps to confirm it, because that's what it was. Then Sergeant Dana Morales showed up. Different energy. No theatrics. She asked for the basics, fast. Who called? What was actually observed? What Reed had actually done? Then she focused on the only thing that mattered: identity verification. Morales didn't demand Reed explain the mission. She understood that federal protective work isn't a street briefing. She pushed Klein toward dispatch confirmation immediately. She asked for credentials to be shown in a controlled way. She asked dispatch to run the federal verification line. Dispatch came back quick once someone actually asked the right questions. Reed checked out real name, real agency, on-duty status confirmed through the proper channels. And right after that confirmation, the whole posture shifted like a switch got flipped. The detention ended fast, too fast. Klein uncuffed him. The backup officer suddenly got quiet. Morales kept it controlled, but you could tell she was already thinking about paperwork and exposure. Reed didn't celebrate. He didn't taunt. He didn't threaten. He just delivered the line that stuck because it was true. He said the problem was never verification. The problem was the delay. He walked back toward the hotel perimeter like he still had a job to finish. Because he did. And behind him, The local officers stood there with a body cam file that didn't match the story they wanted to tell, because the timeline was locked in. The call ended on the sidewalk, but the real fight started in the next hour. Quiet rooms, quiet screens, people replaying the same clip and realizing it didn't look like good instincts. It looked like an unnecessary detention with a clear alternative sitting right there. Reed didn't make a scene. He didn't have to. He did what federal agencies do when a local stop disrupts a protective mission. He documented the contact while it was still fresh. Time, location, names, unit numbers, what was said, and what was offered, what was refused. He flagged the body cam because he knew the body cam told the story cleaner than any email ever would. By the next morning, the complaint didn't land as a rant. It landed as a package. A formal interagency notification hit the department. Not a public blast, not a social media war. A professional, controlled message that basically said, your officer detained an on-duty federal agent, delayed verification, and created operational risk near a protected venue. Provide the footage. Provide the CAD log. Provide the radio traffic. Identify who approved what. That's when the local department's mood changed. Because now it wasn't just a weird stop. Now it was a federal agency asking for records tied to a high-profile event. Command staff hates that kind of attention. Not because they're guilty, because it forces them to be precise. And precision exposes sloppiness. Here's what the department had in front of them. The initial 911 or non-emergency call from hotel staff. Vague. Suspicious man. Taking notes. No threats, no weapons, no trespass. The CAD entry and dispatch notes. What officers were told, what they acknowledged. The body cam timeline. Clear, unedited, with Reed offering a path to verification multiple times. The delay. Minutes that weren't filled with checking. They were filled with control talk and cuff pressure. The moment the sergeant arrived and fixed it in one move by doing what should have happened first. Internal Affairs opened a review. Not because Reed wanted revenge, because the footage forced the issue. Once there's a recorded detention that looks unjustified, supervisors have to decide, defend it or correct it. Klein wrote his report the way officers usually do when they sense heat. He framed Reed as uncooperative. He emphasized unknown subject, refused to explain, officer safety, high-risk area, suspicious behavior near venue. The problem was simple. The camera didn't match the tone of the report. Reed stayed calm. Reed offered verification. Reed didn't threaten anyone. Reed didn't try to flee. Reed didn't reach. Reed didn't act like a danger. The body cam showed a man trying to resolve it the right way, while Klein kept trying to win the moment. Then Morales wrote her report. Short, factual, focused on sequence. She documented that once she took over and initiated proper credential verification, dispatch confirmed Reed quickly, and the detention ended immediately. That report mattered because it built a clean contrast. Before supervisor escalating, after supervisor resolved. Now the department had a choice, and the choice was ugly either way. If command backed Klein hard, they'd be on the hook for defending a detention that looked unnecessary on video. That's how lawsuits happen. That's how policy failures become training bullet points in somebody else's class. If command held Klein accountable, they'd have to admit the real issue. Their officers didn't have a solid procedure for verifying federal credentials under pressure, or they had one, and Klein ignored it. Either way, it's a department problem, and it got more complicated. Because the hotel had cameras too, exterior angles, timestamps, footage showing Reed wasn't sneaking. He was walking in open view. Footage showing Klein keeping Reed there instead of confirming and moving on. The event still happened, but the protective detail got disrupted. That fact alone raised the stakes. When you interfere with a security operation near a venue, every mistake gets a bigger spotlight. Behind closed doors, there were meetings. Training staff pulled policies. Legal counsel reviewed state detention standards and how officer safety gets interpreted. Command staff asked the uncomfortable question, why didn't he just verify it when the guy offered verification? That question kept coming back because it was the whole case. Verification existed. The path was offered. Klein delayed it while escalating the restraint level. The timeline made that undeniable. And once the timeline is undeniable, the story stops being emotional. It turns mechanical. Minutes, decisions, documentation, liability. By the time Internal Affairs finished the first pass, nobody was debating what happened. They were debating what to call it, because the footage didn't show a dangerous suspect. It showed a calm federal agent offering multiple clean verification options, while a local officer kept trying to force the interaction into a detention. The longer Klein delayed verification, the worse it looked, not just legally. Professionally, command staff pulled everything into one timeline: dispatch log, CAD notes, radio traffic, body cam timestamps, supervisor arrival, credential confirmation, release, and that timeline created the department's fork in the road. Option 1, defend the ego. That meant arguing that Klein had reasonable suspicion to stop Reed, and that restraints were justified under officer safety. The problem? Klein didn't just stop him. He prolonged it after Reed offered verification. He tried to make cuffs the solution instead of confirmation. That's what turns a stop into a detention problem. Courts and lawyers don't care how offended an officer felt. They care why the person was held, and whether the police used the least intrusive path once identity was clearly confirmable. Option 2, fix the procedure. That meant acknowledging what Morales already proved on video. Verification solved it in minutes. So the real failure wasn't a suspicious man. It was the decision to stall verification while escalating. The department picked option 2, not out of kindness, out of self-preservation. Klein got pulled off street duty during the review. Then came the corrective actions. Depending on how the legal unit read the detention length and the restraint attempt, it went one of two ways. Discipline plus retraining if command concluded the stop skirted the line, but didn't fully cross it. Written reprimand, documented counseling, mandatory training on detentions, credential verification, and interagency contacts. Morales didn't get praised publicly, but internally, she became the example of how to handle it. Confirm first, don't posture. Civil claim, settlement exposure, if counsel believed the detention crossed the line into an unlawful hold, especially with the clear verification path offered and ignored. That's where things get quiet. No big announcement. Just a claim number, closed-door meetings, and the department cutting a check to make the risk go away. Either way, the interagency complaint didn't get brushed aside. Federal partners don't forget this stuff, and local agencies know it. Relationships matter. Mutual aid matters. Future security events depend on trust. So policy changed. Fast. The department issued an updated procedure for contacts involving claimed federal credentials. Immediate supervisor notification when someone claims federal law enforcement status during a suspicious person call near a sensitive venue. Dispatch verification as the first step, not the last resort. No escalation to restraints without articulable facts beyond, he won't explain his job in public. Clear documentation requirements. Timestamps for when verification was requested, when it was attempted, and when it was confirmed. They also looped the hotel into a better reporting path. If staff saw advance work again, they were told to contact venue security or the event liaison first, and to provide behavior details, not vibes. Note-taking alone wasn't a threat. Walking a perimeter wasn't a crime. Reed kept working. That's the part people miss. He didn't win with a speech. He didn't stand there and lecture anyone. He let the system do what it's supposed to do when there's proof. Recording, timeline, oversight. Klein's mistake wasn't talking to him. It wasn't checking him. It was ignoring the clean verification route and trying to force compliance through control. That's how routine calls turn into civil liability. That's how departments end up rewriting policy after the fact. And the real ending beat wasn't dramatic. It was administrative. That's what accountability looks like in real life. A clip gets reviewed, a timeline gets built. A department chooses whether it wants to defend ego or fix procedure. So let me ask you, if you were Reed, would you have accepted cuffs to keep it calm? Or would you have held the boundary and forced verification the right way? Drop your take in the comments, share this with someone who thinks body cams don't matter, and subscribe for more real-world stories where the truth is in the footage.
Sir, I need to check your documents.
What's the reason for the stop?
Your tag light back there. It's a traffic thing.
Okay. Am I getting a ticket or a warning?
You got anything in the car I need to know about?
No, and I don't consent to any search.
Why not? If there's nothing in there, it's not a big
This
deal.
is my right.
You're done with the traffic stop?
A patrol officer had Jamal Carter standing on the shoulder with his hands visible, spotlight pinned to his face, while the officer talked fast and kept changing the rules. First, it was a routine stop. Then it was questions that had nothing to do with driving. Then it was threats about pulling him out, searching his car, and detaining him for another safety. So here's the question. What happens when an officer tries a driving while black stop on someone who doesn't panic, doesn't argue, and doesn't give up a single right just to make the moment end? Because this time, the target wasn't just any driver. And the camera didn't just capture a bad stop. It captured the start of an accountability chain the officer couldn't outrun. Quick pause. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. And if you watch stories where people stay calm and still hold authority accountable, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this one. Now, rewind. Jamal Carter left the federal courthouse later than he wanted. He was mid-30s, black, and precise in the way people get when their job punishes sloppy details. He prosecuted cases for a living, not traffic tickets, federal cases. He also knew how quickly routine could turn into dangerous the second a cop decided you looked like a problem. He drove a newer sedan. No mods, no tint, no loud anything. He took the same route home because it was well lit and predictable. He didn't speed, he didn't drift. He didn't do the usual mistakes that give an officer a clean reason. A patrol car slid in behind him anyway. At first it stayed back. Then it crept closer. Then it rode his bumper long enough that Jamal could feel the pressure without seeing the driver's face. He checked his speed, checked his mirrors, stayed steady. The lights came on. Jamal didn't slam the brakes. He signaled. He pulled over smoothly and stopped on a wide shoulder with space from traffic. He put the car in park, turned on the cabin light. Rolled the window down halfway, both hands on the wheel. The officer walked up fast, flashlight sweeping the cabin like he expected to find a reason. He asked for license and registration. Jamal moved slowly, narrated what he was doing, and handed them over. No attitude, no lecture, just compliance with the basics. Then the officer shifted. He started asking where Jamal was coming from, where he was going, why he was over here, who the car belonged to, and whether there was anything he should know about inside the vehicle. That last one wasn't small talk. It was a setup for consent. Jamal kept it tight. He gave only what he had to. He didn't volunteer a story. He didn't joke. He didn't try to prove he belonged on that road. The officer claimed a minor equipment issue as the reason for the stop. Jamal didn't debate it. He just clocked it, because the officer's tone didn't match the excuse. The tone said the stop was about him, not the car. The officer leaned in again, peering into the back seat, scanning the floorboard, lingering with the flashlight. He wasn't checking for safety hazards. He was hunting for a reason to escalate. Then came the first push. The officer told Jamal to step out of the vehicle. Jamal complied. Slow, hands visible. He stood where he was directed. He didn't make sudden moves. He didn't challenge the order. He understood the street version of the rules. You can be right and still end up in cuffs if you give them a moment to claim you were non-compliant. The officer immediately went for the real goal. He asked to search the car. Jamal refused consent. Calm voice, no sarcasm, no speech, just a clear boundary. That single refusal changed the entire interaction. The officer's posture tightened. His voice sharpened. He started talking like Jamal had done something wrong by not giving permission. He implied that refusing made him suspicious. He suggested things would go easier if Jamal stopped making it difficult. Jamal didn't match the energy. He didn't argue about the Constitution on the roadside. He used short, clean questions that forced the officer to either justify the stop or admit he was fishing. He asked what the specific violation was. He asked whether he was being detained or free to leave. The officer didn't answer directly. He started issuing commands instead. Stand here, face away, keep your hands visible, then slid right back into another request to search. Jamal refused again and asked for a supervisor. That request landed differently, because people who know nothing ask for a supervisor like it's a threat. Jamal asked like it was a procedure, like he understood how records get reviewed and how timelines get checked. The officer glanced down toward his chest, toward the body camera, then looked back at Jamal. He didn't like the direction this was going. He tried to regain control with a threat. Handcuffs for safety. Jamal didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't step back. He just asked what crime he was suspected of committing and repeated the question that matters most in moments like this. Detained or free to go. 2 patrol cars were on the shoulder now, one behind the other. Backup had arrived quietly and stayed out of it, letting the first officer run the stop. And that's the key detail. This wasn't a quick ticket. This was a pressure stop. A pretext, a test to see if Jamal would fold and consent. Jamal didn't fold. Officer Harlan heard, "I don't consent," and took it like a personal challenge. He stepped closer, angled his body to block Jamal's view of the car, and started talking faster, like speed could replace legal grounds. He repeated the same theme in different words. Refusal meant suspicion, and suspicion meant the officer could do whatever he wanted next. Jamal didn't debate him. He didn't insult him. He didn't plead. He asked for the legal basis to extend the stop beyond the claimed equipment issue. Harlan didn't answer that cleanly. He pivoted to control. He ordered Jamal to move to the curb, then to turn around, then to keep his hands up, then to hand over his phone, then not to reach for anything. Contradictions on purpose. Confusion makes people slip. A slip turns into non-compliance. Non-compliance becomes justification. Jamal didn't slip. He kept his hands visible and said he would comply once the instructions were clear and safe. He asked again whether he was being detained or free to leave. Harlan snapped back that Jamal was being detained for officer safety. That phrase showed up a lot when officers wanted control without explaining why. Then Harlan switched to the next pressure tactic: consequences. He implied the car could be towed. He implied it could be held. He implied an inventory search would happen anyway. So Jamal might as well make it easy. Jamal didn't bargain. He asked if the vehicle was being impounded right now, yes or no. And if yes, what policy or statute allowed towing a drivable car over a minor equipment claim? Harlan dodged again. He said procedure. He said discretion. He said, "You're making it worse." Jamal kept his voice level and repeated the boundary. No consent to search, and he wanted a supervisor. Harlan's backup unit sat back and watched. No interruption. No course correction. That mattered. It told Jamal the department's culture didn't discourage this style of stop. They let it play out. Harlan took a step toward the car, shined his light through the window, and looked for something, anything, that could be turned into probable cause. When he didn't find it, he reached for the magic sentence that officers know can open doors. He claimed he smelled an odor coming from inside the vehicle. He said it like it ended the conversation. Jamal didn't laugh. He didn't accuse him of lying. He didn't say anything that could trigger a combative note in a report. He treated it like a statement that had to be locked into the timeline. He asked the officer to clarify what odor, where it was coming from, and when exactly he first noticed it. Not as a debate, as documentation. That's when Harlan's face tightened, because now he had a problem. The camera was running, the stated reason for the stop had already been given, and the odor appeared only after consent was refused. Anyone reviewing the footage would see the order of events. Harlan tried to regain the upper hand with the next escalation: cuffs. He told Jamal to put his hands behind his back temporarily. Not an arrest, he implied, just a step, just safety. Jamal didn't offer his wrists. He didn't pull away either. He stood still and asked what crime he was suspected of committing and whether he was being placed in handcuffs. Harlan answered with that same empty shield: officer safety. Then Jamal made his own move. He asked for Officer Harlan's badge number and name. Harlan gave it, clipped and irritated. Jamal repeated it back out loud, slow enough for audio to catch it clearly. That's the moment the stop stopped being private. A couple cars had slowed as they passed. One driver, Maya Ellis, still in scrubs from a hospital shift, didn't just glance and keep going. She parked a short distance away and started recording on her phone from inside her vehicle. Her video caught what body cams sometimes blur: the spacing, the posture, the way Harlan kept crowding Jamal, the way the backup officer stood off like a spectator. Harlan didn't notice Maya at first. He was focused on Jamal's refusal to play scared. He tried one more angle. He suggested Jamal didn't belong in that neighborhood. He framed it like concern, but it landed like a gate, like a warning, like a statement about race without saying the word. That was the mask slipping. Jamal let a beat pass, not drama, control. He wanted the words to sit on the record. Then, calmly, he requested a supervisor again. Harlan hesitated. A half second. Long enough. Jamal didn't announce his job yet. He didn't threaten anyone with who he was. He stayed locked on the process, the basis, the detention status, the supervisor. Harlan stepped away and radioed for one, voice suddenly more careful than it had been. Because now the officer knew something else, too. This wasn't just a driver with a complaint. This was a driver building a clean record in real time, with a witness recording from the side. Sergeant Nguyen arrived in under 10 minutes, which told you the department knew exactly what kind of stop this was turning into. She pulled in behind the second unit, stepped out slow, and took one look at the spacing. Jamal standing exposed on the shoulder. Officer Harlan too close, backup hanging back, everyone letting Harlan drive the situation. Nguyen didn't start with bravado. She started with information. She asked Harlan, in that calm supervisor tone, what the stop was for and what the current status was. Ticket, warning, detention, arrest. She needed a category. Harlan gave her a messy answer. He tried to stitch together the equipment claim, then the vague suspicion, then the odor line he'd added later. He talked like he was building a case while he spoke. Nguyen didn't argue with him on the roadside. She didn't need to. She was watching the body cam. She was watching the driver. She was watching the timeline. Then she turned to Jamal and asked his side. Jamal didn't give a speech. He gave a clean sequence. Stop reasons stated by Harlan. Request for consent. Refusal. Escalation. Threats. New reasons appearing after refusal. Request for supervisor. He kept his tone flat and his hands visible the whole time. Nguyen asked for ID. Jamal told her where it was, moved slowly, and handed it over. Along with his license, he produced a credential wallet. Not flashy, official. The kind of thing people don't carry unless they have a reason. Nguyen looked at it once and her face changed. Not panic, not fear, recognition. She asked one follow-up question that mattered: what Jamal did for the federal government. Jamal answered with the title and office: Federal Prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney. He didn't say it like a threat. He said it like it was relevant to how the stop should proceed, because it was. Officer Harlan heard it and went rigid. This was the exact moment the power dynamic snapped. A second earlier, Harlan was trying to control the pace by tossing commands and half-reasons. Now he was doing quick mental math: bodycam audio, supervisor present, a credential in the sergeant's hand, and a driver who clearly knew the rules. Harlan tried to recover by turning polite. He suddenly sounded professional. He tried to reframe the stop as proactive policing. He implied he was just doing his job. He hinted that Jamal was misunderstanding. Nguyen didn't buy the rewrite. She didn't call him a liar either. She just asked whether Harlan had written a citation yet, and whether he had any articulable facts on record that justified a search without consent. Harlan stalled. He talked about training. He talked about indicators. He said the driver seemed evasive, even though Jamal had stood still and answered minimally. He leaned hard on vibes. Nguyen's patience thinned. You could see it in the way she tightened her focus and shortened her questions. She asked one more time for the clear reason for the stop. Then she asked whether Harlan had run the plate and confirmed the vehicle status. Then she asked whether the alleged equipment issue was observable and documented. Harlan couldn't keep the story straight. The stop had too many layers added in the wrong order. Meanwhile, Maya in the parked car kept recording. Her phone captured the part that always matters later: the officer's tone shift after the credential appeared, the way his body language shrank, the way he stopped crowding Jamal once a supervisor and a federal title entered the scene. Nguyen made a decision. She told Harlan to step back to his cruiser. Not a suggestion, a directive. She took control of the scene. Then she turned to Jamal and told him clearly whether he was being detained. She told him the stop was ending. She told him he was free to go. Jamal didn't move fast. He didn't celebrate. He didn't clap back. He did the smart thing. He asked for the incident number, asked for Nguyen's name, and asked how he could obtain the body cam footage through the proper process. Nguyen gave him the information. She didn't love the situation, but she understood the stakes. A clean, calm driver requesting documentation is the kind of request that becomes an exhibit later. Harlan stood near his cruiser, quiet now, watching his stop collapse. Jamal got back into his car the same way he got out. Slow, visible hands, no sudden movements. He started the engine. He merged back into traffic like nothing happened. But it wasn't nothing, because Jamal wasn't going home to cool off. He was going home to make calls. Jamal didn't post about it. He didn't do a victory lap. He did what people in his job do when something looks dirty and the record is already rolling. He documented it. That night, he wrote down the sequence while it was fresh: times, locations, unit numbers, the exact claims Officer Harlan used, in the order he used them. He included the supervisor's arrival time. He noted the backup unit's role, standing there, letting it happen. Then he made 2 calls. First call went to a colleague he trusted inside the U.S. Attorney's office. Not to get revenge, to create a clean internal record that the office had a potential civil rights issue involving a local department. Second call went to the department's professional standards line. He filed a formal complaint, not a rant. He requested preservation of all body-worn camera footage, dash camera footage, radio traffic, CAD logs, and any automatic plate reader hits in the area. Preservation matters. Without it, footage disappears. Policies get stretched. Timelines get fuzzy. Jamal didn't give them that space. And then the third thing happened. The piece most people don't get. Maya Ellis reached out. She wasn't looking for attention. She'd recorded because she'd seen the way the stop was going. The next morning, she sent a message to the department's public email with her video attached and a simple note saying she was willing to provide it to investigators. That forced the department's hand, because now it wasn't just their footage. It was an outside angle that showed posture, distance, tone shifts, and how the officer's entire demeanor changed the moment authority showed up in the form he respected. Within a week, the department contacted Jamal to acknowledge the complaint and schedule an interview. Professional tone, careful wording, no admissions, just process. Internal Affairs pulled the footage, and this is where Officer Harlan's problem became obvious. The timeline didn't support him. The body cam showed the stop reason stated early, the consent request, the refusal, then the escalation, then the new justifications appearing after the refusal, then the threat of cuffs, then the odor claim arriving late. It looked like a stop searching for a reason, not a reason leading to a stop. Maya's video didn't replace the body cam. It boxed it in. It confirmed tone and spacing. It showed how Harlan's aggression wasn't mutual. It wasn't two people arguing. It was one officer trying to dominate a calm driver. The department placed Harlan on administrative leave while they reviewed. Standard move. But the quiet part was this. They couldn't risk him doing another stop like that, while this one was under a microscope. The chief's office got briefed. City legal got briefed. Risk management got briefed. Because even if the department wanted to downplay it, the city understood the exposure, biased policing allegation, unlawful detention issues, potential false statements, policy violations, and a witness video that would look terrible in any public setting. And then the accountability part hit him where it always hits. Paperwork. Harlan had written a report. He had to. That's how departments justify what happened. His report tried to clean the stop up. It used vague terms. It leaned on training and experience. It framed Jamal as evasive. It pushed the odor claim like it had been present from the start. But video doesn't care about narrative. Investigators compared his report to the footage. They compared his radio calls. They compared the exact moment the odor appeared. They compared the wording he used with other stops he'd done. Pattern matters. Then they pulled his traffic stop history. Pretext stops in the same quarter. Similar vague reasons. Disproportionate stops on black drivers. Frequent consent searches. A few complaints that never went anywhere because the drivers didn't have video, didn't have names, didn't know the process. This time, the process found him. Short-term consequences came fast. Harlan lost patrol duties while the investigation continued. His supervisors restricted discretionary stops. The department issued an internal memo reminding officers that refusal to consent doesn't create probable cause and doesn't justify escalation by itself. Sergeant Nguyen's body cam and actions got reviewed too, not because she did wrong, but because command staff needed to show they took the whole event seriously. Jamal didn't just want discipline, he wanted clarity. So he requested the footage through the public records process where applicable, and through formal channels where it wasn't. He also met with a civil rights attorney. Not to cash out, to evaluate whether the stop crossed legal lines that needed more than an internal slap on the wrist. The city moved the way cities move when they see a clean case. They opened settlement discussions. Quiet. Controlled. No dramatic press conference. No public apology on day one. Just lawyers talking about risk, cost, and what happens if this video gets shown in open court. Long-term consequences were the kind that don't make movies, but they change real life. Officer Harlan received serious discipline. In a realistic department, that meant a sustained finding on biased policing and conduct during a stop, plus potential suspension without pay. Depending on the state and prior record, decertification became a real threat. The department updated supervision rules for extended stops. If a stop goes beyond the original traffic basis without a citation being written or a clear, articulable reason, a supervisor must be notified. They revised documentation requirements. Officers had to articulate specific facts for detentions and searches, not vibes. They increased auditing of stop data by race, including where stops occurred and how often consent searches were requested. And Jamal? He didn't win by humiliating a cop. He won by refusing to be bullied into giving up his rights and by making sure the record existed. He kept prosecuting cases. He didn't become a full-time activist, but he did something practical. He spoke at a local community legal clinic, quietly, not for clout, about what to do during a stop, how to keep your hands visible, how to refuse consent without getting loud, how to ask if you're detained, how to request a supervisor, how to document names and badge numbers, how to preserve evidence. Because the lesson wasn't be a federal prosecutor. The lesson was act like the camera is the courtroom, even if you're the only one staying calm. And that's the part people need to hear. If an officer's fishing, your job isn't to talk your way out of it. Your job is to keep yourself safe, keep your words clean, and not hand over rights you don't have to surrender. So let me ask you, if you were Jamal, would you have stayed that calm? Would you have known what to say? And if you've ever been in a stop that felt like it wasn't really about traffic, what happened? Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this with someone who needs it, and don't forget to subscribe for more story times where accountability actually lands.